Good morning. It's October 15th, Monday, and I wanted to do a quick Twiz I review with you. That was due on the 7th, last Sunday, and I've got those graded. And as I said, it's Monday the 15th, and I want to grade the projects as well. And then I will post an announcement in class about midterm grades. So after I grade the Emerson discussion board and the projects, you should have a pretty good idea of where you stand in the class with one of the major projects of the two completed. That's 20% of your grade, and with one of the Twizes, which in essence is 10% of your grade, and then halfway through the whole group and small group discussions. So by the end of the day, you should have a pretty good idea about your midterm grade. And the 26th is the last day that you can withdraw without penalty. And there are a couple of you in the boat where you may want to consider doing that to sort of save your GPA. But let's see where we stand at the end of the day. As for Twiz I, if you go in to submit assignments now, I've made the Twiz available again, and you can go in there and you can review your answers. I've made the correct answers, the answer you submitted, my feedback, and the score now available, so you can check that. You can certainly check the objective questions easily enough, but I kind of wanted to discuss the writing part of the exam, because you'll have to do something sort of similar on your next one, and I want you to be able to be successful. So let me just go through a few things. On the question about the Native American nature tales, first of all, I asked you to choose two to write about. So if you only chose one, you may have lost points in that way. Then I asked you to tell me what phenomena or cultural practices explained. Most of you were able to do that pretty well. But the one thing that I didn't feel like people did was to take that one step further. So based on what's being explained and how it's being explained, the question would be, my dog's in here, the question would be, what does this tell you about the people? Like, I want us to get the idea that the stories that we tell and the way we tell stories and our imagination and what we come up with and the devices we choose, etc., all of this helps define us, who we are as a people. That's why we're studying American literature. So with the Native American tales, for example, in the Seneca tale, where the young boy is transformed by his ability to tell stories. I mean, at first he's this poor, tattered, dirty outcast, scarred up, and then at the end he's transformed into this beautiful, attractive young man that everyone respects. And so storytelling, preserving history and tradition, and the ability to remember all of this is sacred and important part of the identity of the Seneca people. So I was looking for something like that. In the Pima tale, where the Doctor of Earth, in essence, creates humanity, realizes didn't quite do it right, destroys humanity, creates humanity, destroys, creates, destroys. You may draw a conclusion that these people are very patient, they understand the process, and how complex tasks require trial and error. This may mean that they're a pretty innovative kind of group, or that they're very patient, or that kind of thing. So that's what I was looking for in that answer. And if you lost points, it's probably because you didn't take your analysis a step further. In a few specific examples, I give you a little more specific feedback, but overall, that's my feedback for that one. For the other writing, Lord, make me thy spinning wheel complete, thy whole world and distaff make for me, make mine affections thy swift flyers neat, and make my soul thy holy spool to be. That's Edward Taylor's huswifery, and that is an example of a metaphysical conceit. And of course, that's just the beginning of the conceit. As you know, a conceit sort of weaves its way throughout the entire poem. But if you go to an outside source, for example, someone went to Wikipedia to define conceit, make sure you cite that source, don't just copy the definition. But the thing about a metaphysical conceit is that they're very conceptual, therefore they make the comparison between the two objects even more sort of amazing or unbelievable. And so the conceit, and this is a quote from the Wikipedia entry, where was that? Helen Gardner observed that a conceit is a comparison whose ingenuity is more striking than its justness. and that a comparison becomes a conceit when we are made to concede likeness while being very strongly conscious of unlikeness. So to compare a spinning wheel, which is an everyday household appliance in Puritan times, to the way you want God to use you as an instrument to spread the word and to be a reflection of Him, that's a pretty far-flung um, comparison, but that's what that was, a metaphysical conceit for that particular example. So I took my Bible, and in that melancholy time, it came to my mind to read first the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy and so on. That was from Mary Rowlandson's The Sovereignty and Goodness of God, and many of you noticed the captivity narrative. But again, what you all aren't doing, I said, okay, explain the significance. So you might have said something about how important this was to reinforce the Puritan idea of God's hand in everyday affairs and sort of like punishing people who are not righteous and then maybe taking them back in the fold when they renew their covenant, so maybe as a reflection of Puritan belief, maybe because it's one of the first captivity narratives in American literature, and that had an impact on future narratives. But you've had to somehow talk about why that was significant. So if you got 7, 8, 9, that's probably because you identified it correctly, you knew the term, you understood in what ways this passage was an example of that term, but maybe you didn't just take it that one step further. Why is it significant? The next part, that they were always exposed to destruction, that's from Jonathan Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And that is a sermon that is a classic example of a Jeremiad, basically a story of the downfall of a group of people and their destruction, and and with renewal with the covenant with God, it renews the agreement and it takes them out of that time of despair and destruction and into this hopeful, wonderful place. So that's a Jeremiad. And this is significant. Jonathan Edwards is famous for that. Jeremiad, this is in stark contrast to most of his more joyful writing, etc. And it's just an important concept in Puritan literature that we studied for several weeks. And then the next passage was from Daniel Pastorius' letter to his father about the coercion of conscience, nothing else than hypocrites and word Christians are made, etc. That was Daniel Pastorius, and he was a Quaker. And this is an example of pietism. It reflects on the Quaker belief that the individual's relationship with God was sacred. We didn't need the authority of a minister or the church or something, or even the ritual and routine of whatever the catechism or ceremony is in order to be in touch with God. So, this is in contrast to the Puritans, which makes that somewhat significant. And that was pietism. And that's not a regular definition of pietism like you might see today. That's a specific term related to a specific time period. And then the final passage was from Anne Bradstreet's Some Verses to Her Father. My stock so small I know not how to pay. My bond remains in force unto this day. And it's not really a metaphysical conceit because it's not a real conceptual idea. I mean, it's just basically comparing the feeling she has towards her father and what he's done for her to how she feels about, the debt of gratitude that she owes him. It's not really all that far-flung to compare it to financial terms, but what it does do is it reflects pretty strongly expected gender roles in Puritan society. So, that would be why that was significant. Matching, you can check. As far as the extra credit, the Age of Enlightenment, some of the aspects of that are like deism, tabula rasa, what else? God is clockmaker, I said deism, tabula rasa, self-government, empiricism, scientific, rational scientific reasoning and that kind of thing. So you would have had to have mentioned a couple of those in order to get the extra points about Ben Franklin. The almanac, I liked some of the ideas that y'all came up with as far as why almanac's significant, but mainly Ben Franklin wrote Poor Richard's Almanac. That's what I was sort of looking for. Equiano, we read him because from his slave narrative, first of all, that had a huge impact on writing in America as a tradition of slave narratives emerged. His was one of the first, but also it gave us a glimpse into the Middle Passage, which is something that we had not seen in some of the slave narratives up to that point, and that was very influential in helping to abolish the slave trade in England, which did have an impact on America. And then if you didn't know what it meant to Roger, that means you didn't read William Byrd's Colonial Diary, because that meant to have sexual intercourse, and that was just my little way of seeing who actually read something that you weren't, quote, tested on. So, that's your Twiz 1. If you have any questions about it, I hope you'll feel free to email me or stop in to see me. So I'm going to sign off for now, but you're going to be hearing a little more from me later today.